welcome to the Dave Whitty Show. Your host, Dave Whitty. Folks, thanks for tuning in again to episode 3 of my new podcast. Really appreciate you tuning in and checking out the previous podcast. Big shout out to Mozzie for joining me on the last episode. Really insightful into what he does every day, and nice to have him back here in the province. Back in Newfoundland is really nice. Great to hear what he's up to in Toronto and hopefully what he plans to do in the future. Episode 3 is a kind of a switch. It's a bit of a change. We're moving into the sporting community. This week's guest, I have Ryan Sweeney, who is the president of Premier Sports Academy here in Newfoundland. It's actually the first indoor training facility for baseball and sports in the province. So stay tuned for that one. Really, really great chat with Ryan about all things. You know, we're chatting baseball and chatting Mount Pearl, chatting the sporting community itself, a little bit of Blue Jays, and so make sure you stick around for that one. Really, really great look into what he does at the facility, and you know how he's been coping during COVID and what he plans to do after COVID and stuff like that. As we move forward, you know, we're getting into the swing of things of being back in lockdown world here in Newfoundland and you know, especially over here in St. John's on the east coast of the island. Last week they announced a ton of new cases, and by Friday evening they had announced basically a full level 5 lockdown again, as the variant that had come from the UK has moved into the province, and it's you know, it's moving fast. It's caught on. It's one of those things, especially with COVID. It's a lot more. You know, it's traveling through the community. It's people are picking it up. Ton of new cases. So we're all back on lockdown here in St. John's. So just kind of getting by, just doing my thing. Last Saturday night, I did a Facebook Live, first Facebook Live I've done since the previous lockdown. It was great to jump back on and get to chat with people, and everyone was very supportive. So big thanks to everybody for tuning into that. I thought it was really, I had a lot of fun. I mean, it was great to tune in there, and great to play for everybody, especially Saturday night, right before the Leafs and Habs, which in itself was great, a lot of fun. Really enjoyed that game. The Leafs were flying, and you know, the Leafs were playing great. Obviously, up until the last night, they played the Ottawa Senators, and they were up 5-1, and then lost, came back, and Ottawa came back and won 6-5 and in overtime. So I mean, that was a bit of a crushing defeat, but if you're anything like myself, or you know anything about the Leafs and you grew up a Leafs fan, that's not something that's too uncommon. I've seen a lot of posts online, a lot of tweets and stuff talking about, ooh, it was the worst loss, is worse than the David Ayres incident, which in my opinion is completely false. The David Ayres incident, where you know, we lost to a backup goalie, or we lost to a Zamboni driver. Forgive me, there a friggin' Zamboni driver. There's no worse thing in sports, let alone in Leafs history, than that loss. So anybody who's chalking it up to that, I think it's just a little bump in the road for the Leafs. Big game Wednesday and Thursday this week, coming up against the Sens, and obviously back Saturday we're back against the Habs again. So looking forward to those few games this week. Saturday I will be back doing a live feed where I'll be doing a Facebook Live event where I'll be playing some tunes and stuff. So if you're tuning into this podcast and you want to hear some tunes on Saturday, by all means, I'll be back on Facebook Live there Saturday evening, 6 p.m. Newfoundland time. Really enjoyed the last one. You know, I mean, there's not much you can do right now. It's just kind of holding tight, and you know, as the great Dr. Janice Fitzgerald has said, we are just holding fast right now, and you know, gradually we are watching the cases go down. I'm not sure if that's any indication of kind of what's going on here in Newfoundland, but you know, obviously last week there was 100 cases on one day, but you know, they seem to be going down. Not that that's got to make us complacent, but we have to still hold tight and you know, keep the contacts down. So you know, big shout out to everybody who's definitely holding tight right now. It's I think if we can just, you know, hold on for another few weeks, we can probably get back to the kind of position that we were in, you know, the last few months, which was pretty much living it up freely here in the beautiful province of Newfoundland and Labrador. As I mentioned, my guest this week is Ryan Sweeney, Mount Pearl guy. We were friends. We grew up playing sports together. Ryan's a couple years younger than me. He had moved away to Ontario to pursue his dream of playing baseball, and he really seen that there was an opportunity here in Newfoundland for a facility, to really train players. That's a problem here in Newfoundland, is obviously you're dealing with a number of factors, but weather being number one. So I think Ryan nailed it right on the head. He wanted to keep players training, especially all year round. And, I thought what was really interesting, he spoke about, when he was living away and playing ball away in places like Ontario, spring actually happens where it doesn't quite happen so fast in Newfoundland. So these ball players are getting out and they're playing ball, early in the spring, March and April. They're starting to hit some of the fields and stuff like that. Whereas you're probably not doing that here in Newfoundland until about June. Maybe late May if we're lucky. But we all know, we've all been out on the May 2-4 weekend. We've seen snow. So that he really nailed it. Like I said, he was the first to open up the facility here, and they've been doing great things. They run a ton of programs and clinics and stuff like that. They had a real tough go. They had planned basically to open up right for spring training, as you would say, in Newfoundland. And last year, that's kind of when COVID happened. So they were hung out for a few months, and obviously then when everything kind of opened back up here in Newfoundland, it was summertime. So, anyways, I'll leave Ryan to tell you that. Obviously this week we did a virtual interview, did it through Zoom and stuff. So hopefully the audio quality is all right. I'm going to try to keep these podcasts to live interviews as much as I can. Right now, we're obviously in lockdown here in Newfoundland, so there won't be any live interviews for the time being. So we're just going to have to do the Zoom thing. But big shout out to Ryan and all the gang over at Premier Sports Academy for joining me on this episode. So make sure you stick around and tune in for Ryan. Cheers. And I'd like to welcome Ryan Sweeney of Premier Sports Academy to the podcast. Thanks for joining me, Ryan. How you doing today, man?
Good, Whitty. Thanks, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Like I say, thanks for coming on. I'm just getting this new podcast going. So, a big thing I wanted to do, especially with having somebody like yourself on, is I really wanted to make sure that people know about this podcast. That I'm not going to keep it to just musicians and people in the arts community. I really want to support people in the community who are involved in different activities and different things, especially someone like yourself with the programs that you do. So maybe you could just let everybody know at home who you are and kind of what you do.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Ryan Sweeney. I'm the president and founder of Premier Sports Academy. Just a quick synopsis. Premier Sports Academy is the first indoor baseball and softball facility in Newfoundland, inspired by my childhood growing up playing baseball, we'll say, and paths that I went down. So just a bit of a quick overview.
Yeah, right on. That's definitely one thing I wanted to ask you about. Obviously, we both grew up in Mount Pearl together. Maybe you could kind of explain, what it was like growing up in Mount Pearl, especially within the sporting community. Obviously, we grew up playing a lot of sports together, and I obviously played with your brother and stuff like that as well. But we grew up playing baseball and basketball and hockey. So maybe you could just describe maybe what that was like growing up in Mount Pearl within the sporting community.
Yeah, it's a really good question. When we were growing up, and just for a time frame for people, we're talking from a sporting perspective, somewhere from about the mid 90s up until the early 2000s. At least that's while I was living here. And Mount Pearl was very strong in basically every sport. We won baseball what seemed like every year. We were winning basketball provincially, 7, 8, 9 at St. Peter's, O'Donnell, the same thing. Soccer was really strong. I mean, literally every sport in Mount Pearl, the sporting culture in Mount Pearl at that time was really strong. And the big part of that, I think, is you had some incredible volunteers that were running the programs at that time. So definitely, from my experience and from what I remember was very impressive in terms of our competitiveness.
Yeah. And what do you think maybe the reasoning, like you say, you just mentioned the volunteers and stuff like that, but what are some of the reasons that you think Mount Pearl was so competitive within the sporting community? Obviously there was some great programs and coaching and all that stuff. I'm assuming played a great factor,
Yeah, and volunteers is definitely a big part of it. There's a few factors, some that's not in the control of the volunteers. I say, today paradise is what Mount Pearl was 20 years ago. A
Yeah,
lot of young families with young kids. I think that plays a very big part of it. And the other thing, I can't speak to all of the sports, but one of the things I remember vividly about baseball is that we were coached by the kids that were still playing, those kids that were like 18 to 22, 23 years old, the summer student job. So, I was coached by guys like Grant Kenny and Kevin Farrell and all those guys that were still very good baseball players at the time. And those were guys we looked up to. And so, they were still playing on provincial teams and senior finals. And so I think that played a big factor in terms of our ability, I think, to compete, because we were a smaller center, but we went head to head with St. John's every year. And at least in my age groups, we won, quite often.
Was that something you were involved in yourself? Kind of like, were you still kind of actively playing and coaching as well? Or were you involved in anything like that?
Yeah. So just before I left, I left Newfoundland in 2004. So I was 15 when I left. I had just started. I had done maybe like my first or second summer. So I was doing a little bit of coaching, but I was doing a little bit more of the umpiring because the kids used to umpire as well. So a little bit involved, but I was just kind of, wetting my feet at the time.
Right. That's something else I wanted to ask you about. Moving away in 2004, I guess in 2004, you were probably only 14 or 15 years old at the time,
15.
right? 15.
Yeah.
And what was that like? You moved to Ontario to play ball, I believe, right? So, what was that kind of like as a 15-year-old? It must have been, quite a change leaving Newfoundland to go, especially, to go and play some professional ball. Like that must have just been such a crazy difference in the scene of baseball itself.
Yeah, it was a really good step up in competition. I mean, one of the things I think we were lucky, I kind of already indicated, we won a lot with Mount Pearl. So I had gone away to the Atlantics and Nationals, multiple times. I think by the time I was 15, I had represented Newfoundland in baseball, either at the Atlantic or the national level, like 10 times, So I had spent a lot of time playing baseball outside of the province. So I had seen that level of competition, but being there every day at that level was, it was a good challenge. And one of the things I kind of look back on and I tell people now, especially the kids that I train, is I was as good as everybody there, but there was many people like me versus, when you're playing in smaller communities, there's maybe only one or two good players on a team or, that are better than most everybody else. When you're playing at programs up there, they've got like 6, 7, 8, 9 guys deep on a team that are really good. Right. So that was one of the first big things I noticed. And the other thing that I noticed is just there's just the volume of people that play, which also it does make a difference. As much as I try to tell people it doesn't, get them to focus on the things we can be doing correctly. Volume of people playing certainly has an impact as well.
Did like the move kind of something like that? Did that kind of maybe solidify you moving into the premier sports? I will get into that. And I want to ask you about some of the things that happens, at the facility and stuff like that. But was that move, you'd seen like a lot of players who were probably developing 12 months of the year, especially in baseball, where, obviously here it's not a sport where you can be outside all the time. It's not like basketball. You can be in a gym or et cetera. But was that something that kind of pushed you towards maybe doing the opening the facility and stuff like that?
Yeah, for sure. And that was the bit of the eye opener as well. I remember as a kid, there was a couple of things you heard. It was population, right? Was a big reason why we couldn't compete, and weather. Those were two big reasons we couldn't compete. And then when I moved to Ontario, one of the first things I saw was like, yeah, those things are true, but they also have facilities as well. So why is it that this place that has more people and better weather, why do they also have facilities? Like, I think like we're the ones that should need them more than anybody. And so, I mean, when I first moved up there in 2004, we played fall ball into deep October, which is something you can't do here.
Mm-hmm.
I believe we took like a month and a half off. So all of November and half of December. And I think just before Christmas, we got together indoors once a week. And then came back after Christmas, and we were indoors every week until we could get outside on the field. And that's almost 20 years ago now. I started doing that, so that was something I noticed. And then when I started playing, with some of the other elite programs, it went to the next level. We had strength and conditioning coaches. We were talking about nutrition. We were learning things. Obviously, it's evolved a lot in 20 years, but we were having those conversations then when I moved away, and those weren't conversations that we were having here at that time.
Yeah, you mentioned a little earlier about Paradise essentially being kind of the the new Mount Pearl, where it's a lot of younger families. Like that's where people are starting to raise, with the expansion, especially of Paradise. And, it is essentially like the way we were growing up. We were all, our parents all had young families and we all grew up in Mount Pearl together. Was that was that kind of a reason maybe why you put the facility in Paradise? Did that have anything to play with into it, or?
That's a really good question. And honestly, I'll be, fully candid with this one. Obviously, my first thought was put it in Mount Pearl. I was being very nostalgic, right? I grew up in Mount Pearl. But as I went through the process of the business, and I guess this is a little secret, I guess I'm sharing with everybody now, but Paradise still counts as a rural community. So when you're applying for government loans, you can get better loans in rural communities. So I had access to better funding by having the building just 20 seconds down the street in Paradise.
Wow, that is absolutely incredible. So yeah, let's dig into a little bit what goes on every day. And how you've been open now. I think I was digging down through some of your social media, which by the way is absolutely phenomenal. I don't know who's doing your social media, if it's you.
That's Noah. That's Noah Anderson.
Man,
you can give
he
Noah
is on absolute fire with the social media. He kills it. I was digging down through some of your stuff the last couple of days and trying to come up with some stuff that I really wanted to ask you. And I was very impressed by the social media. So pass that on to Noah by all means. And who is Noah exactly for anybody listening at home?
Noah's also a Mount Pearl boy, so he's a couple of years younger than I am. So he grew up playing baseball in Mount Pearl, and very similar. He left when he was a little bit older. He actually played some university baseball at Brock University down in the Niagara region. So yeah, another kid with baseball aspirations locally that ended up back in Newfoundland.
Right on. So yeah, so let's dig into the Premier Sports and what kind of activities and programs and stuff that you actually do, week to week. Let's kind of talk, say, pre-COVID. I don't really want to get into the COVID. I will ask you a few questions about that, but in a perfect world where there's no COVID going on, what kind of programs and options would your facility provide?
This COVID lockdown or the one time last year?
Say previous to the original COVID.
Okay, yeah. It's funny because it's helped the business model evolve for sure. But the original, we'll say, structure, which is still to this day, was we rent out the facility, of course. So, St. John's Minor Baseball, Baseball Newfoundland, Paradise Baseball, any of the associations want to rent time, they can rent time and offer their own programming. We also would do memberships to the general public. So someone who, doesn't have time to come on Wednesday night when Paradise or St. John's offers their program, they can come in kind of on their own time during what we call our membership time and kind of work at their own speed. And then also on top of that, we would run different camps, pitching camps, hitting camps, things like that. And then it evolved into kind of where we are now, which we can get to in a bit. But it's evolved into some more structured programming, we'll say. But that was the original intent, and now it's evolved since then.
Yeah, right on. That's super neat. And obviously, with everything that's happened with COVID, I'm sure that's probably stuck a little wrench in some of the plans that's been going on. But what have you guys been doing? Like, obviously, we've been very lucky here in Newfoundland up until just a couple days ago. We were floating through this thing with utter ease. Like, man, we managed to get through the summer and the fall, like basically as if this thing wasn't even here, except you had, stuff was at the capacity stuff was obviously a little lower and you had to wear your masks and stuff like that. But other than that, like the cases have been so low. So how was the summer and the fall for you guys with regards to, with the COVID and stuff like that? And how did it work for you guys?
Yeah, it's a good question. Obviously, so we opened up, I think like June 26th or something like that. The summer was an absolute grind. It happened in reverse. And, just from like a business perspective, March, April, May, like those should be our busiest months.
Of course.
We should, that's when we should be making our hay, right? That's when the sun shines,
Yep.
From a business perspective. We missed all of those months because of COVID. So we opened up in the summertime when kids are going outside to play baseball. And I just remember Noah and I just looking at each other like, okay, like, here we go. So we ended up running a couple of things that worked really well. So we did some multi-sport day camps for kids and that creates interest. And one of the programs we ran that worked very well was, we called it our indoor league. So whenever it would rain, we would run an indoor league where kids would pitch and hit live against each other. Obviously, there's no fielders,
Sure.
but it was about that more polished part of the competition, so they could pitch live and hit live. And we would live stream that every day, so parents could watch their kids pitching and hitting. And one of the perks, when you pitched, you actually got instruction. So, think about what you don't get in a game. Your coach is on the bench. Your coach doesn't. Noah's literally standing right there next to you, coaching you through the situation, talking about the pitch count, how to attack each hitter. And we've got lineups of kids, so we have them working in tandem. So each kid gets 3 to 4. They can face 3 to 4 batters, right? Because we're very cautious of arms. And so we had a pitch count. We made sure they warmed up properly. Once you were done hitting, if you were hitting, you went into the batting cage, and it was basically almost like an assembly line of kids pitching and hitting in rotation. And then once the number of pitchers that we had selected for the day was over, if we had time left, we'd bust out a home run derby or something like that.
Nice. And try to keep it fun, obviously, and exciting. And that's the name of it too, especially with young kids. You want to make sure that these kids are having fun on top of also getting better every day. You kind of just led me to another question I had to ask you. I was looking down through some of your social media stuff, and it was something I was very unaware of, especially being out of the baseball community for so long. I seen a post about mound visits. I dug back. It was quite a while ago, but is the mound visits limited in baseball or something like that? Can you explain that to me and maybe anybody, like you say, who's listening? Because I was reading that and I was like, what the hell is going on here? So what was that all about?
It was very contentious at the time. And, I certainly eased off on it, but I still feel the same way. When they did the COVID restrictions, and I completely understand, they eliminated mound visits.
Okay, so it was COVID related. Is that what it was?
Yes.
Okay.
They eliminated mound visits from play. And one of the things, and the part that was, it's tough about it is, usually a mound visit, you go right out on the mound and, whatever, but they didn't allow even for the social distancing aspect. It's like you couldn't even go and stay more than 6 feet away. So it was a bit of a blanket rule. And once they put the rules out, they weren't going to change them after the fact. And everyone understood that. I mean, you're not going to push too hard, but, and that's one of the things, I've played lots of different sports. There's very few things that you do in sport that's as intense as pitching, in terms of loneliness and the competitive, all of those things, the anxiety. And, that was a thing too, is like someone we have on the podcast on ours, we're having on tomorrow, China McCarney. This guy was a stud, Division I, played at one of the best schools, professional baseball. This guy had a panic attack pitching, and it didn't just affect his baseball career. It's affected his whole life. He now has regular panic attacks because of an experience he had while playing baseball. So we were just trying to convey, there's a lot more going on here than just, a mound visit, right? So that was kind of what we were getting into, is that there's a lot of important things that happen in a mound visit that we're neglecting, that you can't just shout out from the sideline.
Right. And what age kids are we talking about here with that kind of stuff? I mean, was that all baseball at the time when they brought it back after after COVID, or?
I'm not sure what all the rules.
The reason I was kind of asking that is more so you say mound visits, especially you don't want to leave a kid out on the mound who's getting lit up, for who's this 11-year-old kid, he might never want to go back out there again. And a mound visit is not only crucial to maybe the change of a pitcher, but as a coach, you want to go out there and help them through something, chat them through, calm them down, let them know it's going to be okay. You got to get through this inning or anything like that. So yeah, I feel like that was such a crucial thing to baseball. It was the mound visits. I was very interested when I read that, and I didn't realize it was COVID, and especially with COVID, they've made such weird rules, not just baseball, but with regards to everything. And obviously you guys are going to go sit on the bench. As soon as that pitcher comes off the mound, he's coming in and sitting on the bench next to you. So I thought that was kind of odd. So yeah, thanks for that little bit. I was very, very curious about how that was working. But another thing I wanted to ask you is, I don't want to say post COVID, you know what I mean? Because obviously there's no real clear sign of the end of this. It's not okay, in September we're done with it. It's there's a vaccine rollout going on. Obviously in Newfoundland we just got a huge spike of cases, especially on the Avalon, the eastern part of the island. In a perfect world, what would be the ideal situation for you guys? say after everything is all died off?
Well, it's funny now that you say that. I think we're doing it, and we developed it during COVID. The only thing that's different would be our membership structure. So once we kind of reopened, and you can tell why now, and I'll get into it a little bit, but because of contact tracing, we eliminated our memberships during COVID because I just don't want to deal with the complexity of people dropping in and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only way you can have a quote unquote membership at PSA now is to be part of our 8-month-long development program. So if anything ever happened, I have all 100 emails in a distribution list and I go, boom, see ya, right?
Right.
So that's the only thing missing, but we've gone now more towards, I don't want to say specialization, but kids that are just looking for more, not just from baseball, but from, health perspective, physical and mental and things like that. And we're kind of separating our programming. So, there's lots of great programs that minor baseball offers. So we let them offer those and, we don't compete, and we're kind of picking a lane to stay in so that everybody can coexist a little bit together. But now we're moving in a direction where kids that want more can get more. And I think that's probably the best way to describe it.
Right. Yeah. Is that something that like you guys focus on as well? Is obviously not just the hitting and the pitching and the fielding, but you focus on nutrition, like you say, like you offer any programs where you do stuff like that, or, whether it's like being in the gym or working in your cardio and just, different aspects that obviously will help you in the game itself, but not quite associated with baseball.
Yeah, that's a big one for us. We tell our kids, when you leave our program, you're not just going to be a better baseball player. You're going to be a better hockey player. You're going to be a better basketball player. So we went out and hired Dan Hearn. Dan Hearn did his master's at the University of Houston in athletic training. Dan worked for the Growlers. He has a very, very strong sports resume in athletic therapy. He's probably the most qualified person in the province. We went out and got him. So he runs strength and conditioning programs for each of our age groups once a week. So we have that piece. And then the other one is we kind of linked up with a group called UEQ. And, also during our podcast during COVID, we made a lot of connections. So we have a big focus on mental health and mental training. So we do visualization, breathing, we do emotional intelligence games, meditation. Like we touch a lot of these bases. It's not just about baseball for sure.
Right. Yeah. Good for you guys. That's incredible. And I know that's probably something that maybe has lacked in the province over the last, not to anybody's fault, but just that's kind of how the world is gradually changing. People, it's not just about physical health anymore. It has a lot to do with your mental health. And I think that goes a long way, especially in the game and progressing forward as an athlete. So, kudos to you guys for doing that kind of stuff. Another thing I wanted to ask you is, I know kind of before the COVID stuff, you were bringing in certain people for clinics, pitching clinics and stuff like that. I don't know if you can elaborate on that a little bit and if you plan on doing any of that in the future.
Yeah, for sure. So we brought in, the first guest we brought in was when we did our grand opening last year. So Trevor Knife is his name, ended up becoming a good friend of his over the last, 4 or 5 years while I was, planning out this business. But Trevor coaches in the Angels system with the LA Angels. He coaches one of their minor league teams. So he came in, did the grand opening with us. He actually owns a facility in Kitchener, just down the road from mom and dad, actually. And so we brought him in. We had intentions on bringing in a few other guests. And as soon as we can, we will, because that's a big piece. You hear people talk about it all the time. Like, kids won't take advice from mom and dad, right? And it's the same thing. We have some qualified people here for sure, but after a while, there's a bit of stagnation where kids need that little bit extra. So if you can bring in an additional resource that has that wow factor, has some of that allure, you're going to get some high retention in terms of skills. And it's also professional development for us as coaches as well. It's an opportunity for me to learn from somebody as well, not just the kids. And that elevates what I can offer in the future as well. So we'll definitely be doing that, as soon as we can, which is why we do our podcast as well. Every time
that was
we do our podcast.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about the podcast because it's, I watched a few episodes the other night and, kudos to you guys again, because you're basically, a lot of people use this word, especially with COVID, is pivot. You know what I mean? Everyone kind of had to pivot. And I noticed one thing that you guys did was basically as soon as COVID happened and, people weren't allowed to get together in groups, is that you guys took it to this podcast and you were getting great guests on, like some big names going on there. And you guys were just chatting about baseball and chatting about developing and, mental health and anything that is associated with the game. Is that something you guys plan to do? I guess maybe now again, since we're back in round 2 of lockdown.
Yeah. So we did our first episode yesterday, actually, with Adam Vela from Mizuno. So what we're going to do, instead of doing, I think we did 50 or 60 straight days during the last one.
Yeah, they were incredible too. Like,
it was
and
awesome.
really, really insightful. I found, like, really, really insightful.
But we did, so this time what we're going to do, because we have our group of kids now, we're going to keep them engaged. So we've put all of our practice sessions that we had physical, they're now virtual. So I've got a Zoom call after I'm finished with you with my kids. It's our daily check-in. And then our 17U group has their strength and conditioning session and their mental prep tonight. But we've got a guest lined up tomorrow. So tomorrow we've got China McCarney from Jaeger Sports coming in. On Monday, we have Lou Pote. Lou Pote won a ring with the Angels, and he works with the Okotoks Dogs Academy. He's coming in on Monday. Next week, we've got Austin Byler coming in, and he's from Major League University. He's down in Arizona. And talking to a gentleman named Lee Delfino now. He was a bit of a Canadian legend in his day. And then my buddy again, Trevor Knipe. So we're just lining up the guests. We're going to roll Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays now until they tell us we're allowed to go back to work again.
Right on. Yeah, no, that's incredible. And it's such a smart thing to do, to try to keep people involved and keep people active. And you know what I mean? If people can't get out, let's talk about baseball. Let's talk about what we can do to get better. And, especially to have some of these professionals in, like you guys have been bringing in. One thing I wanted to ask you as well was, you just mentioned your family just down the road in Kitchener. I think anybody who grew up in Mount Pearl, especially around our age, whether it be a few years younger or a few years older, kind of knew the Sweeney family, or they were well around. So, what kind of, how much involvement was your family in bringing this to light, and how much was your family involved in your kind of your activity as growing up as someone in the sports community?
Yeah, that's a big thing with sports. Anyone that's kind of listening, if you're not involved in sports or you're not heavily involved in sports, I say, like, there's levels to things. And I mean, with sports, we were all in. Dad coached, mom volunteered. I was playing sports. Susan was playing sports. Stacy was playing sports. Ronnie was playing sports. And Trevor Murphy, of course.
Of course, yeah.
Trevor Murphy, talks about mom all the time. She was arguably one of the best volunteers in Mount Pearl.
Absolutely, yeah.
With everything. I mean, her ability to raise money, her ability to organize trips, her ability to do anything from a managerial perspective that took that burden off of parents and coaches and players was, pretty incredible. I mean, we won Volunteer of the Year as a family at O'Donnell High School. Mom did a ton on the executive for baseball. Like, there's so many things. And that's, big part of it. And Dad coached a ton of sports. Dad coached hockey in Mount Pearl. Dad coached baseball in Mount Pearl. Susan ran the track for many, many years. So there's contributions, not just in one place, but kind of all over the place. So it was a big part of our life for sure.
And do you feel like that's kind of rubbed off on you now as you're getting a little older and you're running your own kind of programs and stuff like that, especially like you mentioned, like your mom with her managerial side of it, and your dad was the, coaching kind of stuff. Like, they're all great features to have and to watch growing up. So was that a big part, and is it a big part in your daily activities?
Yeah, for sure. I think about it this way. I think some of the stuff that people might find stressful about sports, I feel like it's second nature to me. I'm not intimidated by fundraising. I'm not intimidated by the tough emails or phone calls to parents. I'm not intimidated about giving kids honest feedback, constructive criticism about things they need to be doing better. I'll be hard on them when they need to be hard. Like, all those things feel like normal things to do, where people shy away from parts of it. And for me, it's all I know. So to me, it's like second nature.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, kudos to you, Ryan. I got to hand it to you, man. You've done well, and I'm looking forward to getting batting around a few balls myself in the facility someday. So big shout out to you and the Premier Sports Academy. Thanks so much for popping on. For folks who are listening at home, maybe you could just say where you can find you guys on social media or even in live in person, or just kind of let everybody know where you are, how they can find you.
Perfect. Yeah. So on all platforms, we're at Premier Sports NL. So that's on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We run our daily podcast, or our podcast now called the Guest Speaker Series, on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And you can usually catch that somewhere between 4 and 5 o'clock in the day. And we usually roll those live on Facebook Live. But that's basically it. I appreciate you for, having me on, and if we can return the favor, you certainly let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. One last thing I wanted to ask you. How do you think the Jays are looking this year?
That's a tough one. Noah and I had a conversation about this the other day. I think they are built to compete. I think they're going to get 30, maybe 50 games to do so. If they're competitive at that point, they're going to go out and get some key pieces to push them over the hump. If they're not competitive, you might see them start to sell the farm a little bit. So
right. What do you think are some of those key pieces that they might need to add just in case?
A veteran arm is always something you need to add. And for that team, they seem strong up and down the lineup. I feel like a catcher is probably one of the only big holes that you can see right now, of course, barring injuries. But, an arm in the bullpen never hurts. An arm in the starting rotation never hurts. And obviously they're weak at the catching position.
Yeah,
that would be basically it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, right on. Thanks very much, Ryan Sweeney. Really appreciate you coming in today, and good luck with everything. Stay safe, and we'll chat with you soon.
Sounds good, Whitty. Take care.
Cheers. Big shout out to Ryan Sweeney there of the Premier Sports Academy. Loved having a chat with Ryan. Haven't got to catch up with him a whole lot over the last few years. And Ryan being a friend of mine, we grew up together. It was nice to get to chat with him and kind of chat about some old stuff. Loved hearing about the Sweeney family and where he kind of came up with the idea of the Premier Sports Academy and stuff like that. Really looking forward myself to getting over there. If you are in the market of baseball and stuff like that, or maybe you got some kids or you're just a baseball fan yourself, be sure to check out the Premier Sports Academy. And, they're really running some great programs over there, and, really, really ahead of the game here in Newfoundland, because they're the first to do it. So kudos to those guys. They're great. They're fantastic. And I really enjoyed having a chat with Ryan there. As for me, like you say, I previously mentioned, I'll be back Facebook Live on Saturday evening, banging out a few tunes. If you got any requests or anything like that, by all means, fire them my way. I'd love to play them for you. Other than that, I've been really looking forward to my next week's guest. Not going to divulge into who that might be, but I'm really looking forward to that interview. If you've been enjoying these podcasts, thank you very much. Really appreciate all the compliments and everything that everyone's sent my way. And if you've been enjoying it, please share this around with whoever you might think might enjoy this podcast. I know we're all back in lockdown now, so just a great way to kill a half an hour or whatever. So thanks for all the shares and all the kind compliments and everything like that. So that about does it for me, guys. Thanks so much from downtown St. John's, Newfoundland. My name is Dave Whitty. We'll catch you again. Peace.